The smell of drying salt and rotting fish scales is the only world you have ever known. Your fingers are calloused, the skin split by the constant friction of hemp nets, and your shoulders ache with a rhythmic, predictable exhaustion. You are mid-sentence, arguing with your brother about the repairs needed on the port side hull, when a shadow falls across the tangled mesh between you. You don't look up immediately. Shadows are common on the shores of Galilee, traders, tax collectors, or idle wanderers. But this shadow stays. It feels heavy, not with weight, but with a sudden, localized silence that drowns out the slapping of the waves against the wood. You look up, squinting against the harsh Mediterranean sun. A man stands there. He isn't dressed in the fine linens of a Pharisee or the armor of a Roman. He looks like a traveler, dusty and worn, yet he watches you with a terrifyingly focused intensity. He doesn't ask for the price of your catch. He doesn't offer a greeting. He simply speaks two words that bypass your ears and vibrate in the marrow of your bones. Follow me. The net in your hand feels suddenly like a leaden weight, a tether to a life that died the moment those words hit the air. Your brother looks at you, his eyes wide with a mirror of your own confusion, but your feet are already moving. You drop the net, you don't stow it, you don't tie off the boat, you leave the tools of your father's trade scattered in the sand. As you step away from the shoreline, you feel a visceral tear, a spiritual severance from the safety of the known. You are stepping into a void governed entirely by the back of a man who hasn't even looked back to see if you were coming. He knows you are.
The first few days are a blur of dust and cognitive dissonance. You find yourself walking behind him through villages you visited a dozen times, yet everything looks different. You are no longer a spectator of the world. You are an apprentice to its creator. You watch him touch a man whose skin is white with leprosy, a man you would have moved 20 paces upwind to avoid. You expect the man to be rebuked or Jesus to be defiled. Instead, you watch the scales of disease fall away like scorched parchment, revealing flesh as soft as a child's. Your stomach turns, not with disgust, but with the sudden, violent realization that the laws of nature you've obeyed your whole life are subservient to the voice of the man whose sandals you are now cleaning. You sit around a small fire on the outskirts of a town whose name you've already forgotten. The transition from fisherman to disciple is not a gentle slope, it is a cliff. Your mind is a storm of practical anxieties. Who is paying for the grain? What did your father say when the sun went down and you hadn't returned? Jesus looks across the flames at you. He doesn't address your questions directly. He begins to speak about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. His voice is calm, but it carries the weight of a decree. You realize he is reading the panic in your chest like a scroll. He tells you that your father knows what you need. The Father. He speaks of God with a terrifying, intimate familiarity that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You realize that your understanding of the divine was a distant, cold architecture of rules. This man is inviting you into a burning house of relationship. As the weeks turn into months, the novelty wears off, replaced by a grueling spiritual discipline. You are tired. You are constantly hungry. You're surrounded by crowds that push and shove, their desperation and oily film that clings to your clothes. You find yourself becoming territorial, trying to protect him, trying to manage the chaos. You rebuked a group of mothers bringing their children forward, thinking you were doing his work by maintaining order. He turns on you. The look in his eyes isn't anger. It's a profound, grieving disappointment that hurts worse than a lash. He tells you that the kingdom belongs to such as these. You realize that your instincts are still those of a man of the world, valuing power, efficiency, and status. To follow him is to have your entire value system dismantled and reassembled in a shape that feels to your human ego like weakness.
Doubt arrives not in a storm, but in the quiet hours of the morning when the mist is on the hills. You watch him slip away to pray, leaving you with the others. You whisper among yourselves, "Is he the one? If he is the king, where is the army? Where is the plan to overthrow the prefect?" You are waiting for a political revolution. He is performing a heart transplant on the nation. The tension inside you grows. You want a throne, he keeps talking about a cross. You don't understand the word, or rather, you refuse to. It is a Roman word, a word of shame and slow death. You convince yourself it's a metaphor. The first real trial comes on the water. It is familiar territory, the Sea of Galilee. You know these winds. You know when the air turns heavy and the sky bruises purple that a gale is coming. But this storm is different. It feels personal. The waves are not just water, they are walls of black glass shattering over the gunwales. You are screaming, hauling on ropes that are slick with spray, your heart hammering against your ribs. You look to the stern. He is asleep. The fury that rises in you is more dangerous than the water. How can he sleep while you are dying? It is the ultimate question of the disciple. Does he care? You wake him with a cry that is half prayer, half accusation. He stands up. He doesn't grab a bucket. He doesn't help with the sail. He speaks to the wind as if it were a disobedient dog. Peace, be still. The silence that follows is deafening. The water flattens instantly, the only sound the rhythmic dripping from your clothes. The terror you felt during the storm was nothing compared to the terror you feel in the calm. You are in a boat with a man who commands the molecules of the earth. He looks at you, his hair wet, his expression tired. "Where is your faith?" he asks. You realize then that the trial wasn't the storm. The trial was the silence of God in the middle of it. You failed. You trusted your eyes more than his presence. Your growth is measured in these failures. You learn that obedience isn't about understanding the destination, it's about the proximity to the guide. He sends you out, 2 by 2, into the surrounding villages. He tells you to take nothing, no staff, no bag, no bread, no money. It feels like a suicide mission. You walk into a strange town, your stomach growling, feeling vulnerable and foolish. But as you speak the words he gave you, something happens. You see a man who hasn't walked in years stand up. You feel the power move through your own hands, not yours, but a borrowed authority that leaves you trembling. You return exultant, bragging about the demons that submitted to you. He checks your pride instantly. "Do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you," he says, "but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." He is constantly pulling your gaze away from the horizontal world of results and forcing it upward to the vertical world of eternal standing.
The demands of the calling begin to escalate. He starts talking about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. You see the crowds thin out, the intellectuals scoff, the casual followers slip away, muttering about hard sayings. Even your friends look at the ground, their faces pale. He turns to the 12 of you, the core who have left everything. Do you also want to go away? It is a moment of pure, agonizing choice. You could go back to the nets. You could return to the shore, find a wife, and live a life that makes sense to your neighbors. You look at his hands, the hands that have healed, the hands that have broken bread, the hands that held the wind. You realize there's nowhere else to go. To leave him would be to wander into a world that has lost its color. "Lord, to whom shall we go?" you whisper. You have the words of eternal life. It is the first time you've chosen him not out of excitement, but out of a desperate, scorched earth loyalty. The shadow of the end begins to lengthen. You are in Caesarea Philippi when he asks the ultimate question, "Who do you say that I am?" The answer sits in your throat like a coal. You speak it, the confession that seals your fate. You are the Christ. He accepts the title, but immediately begins to describe his own murder. You try to stop him. You try to protect the vision of the king you still harbor in your heart. He rebukes you with a ferocity that leaves you reeling, calling your protective instinct satanic. You learn a bitter lesson. You cannot love the master while hating his mission. You cannot follow the king to the palace if you are unwilling to follow the lamb to the slaughter. The atmosphere shifts as you head toward Jerusalem. The air is thick with a sense of impending collision. You are walking into the mouth of the lion, and you feel the cowardice beginning to rot your resolve. You sit in an upper room, the air heavy with the scent of roasted lamb and bitter herbs. He does something that shatters your remaining dignity. He ties a towel around his waist and begins to wash your feet. You try to refuse. It is a subversion of everything you understand about authority. But he insists, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." As his hands scrub the road grime from your toes, you realize that the kingdom of God is a kingdom of descent. To rise, you must go down. To lead, you must serve. To live, you must die. Then comes the garden. The Gethsemane moon is a pale, disinterested witness to your weakness. He asks you to stay awake. He asks for 1 hour of companionship in his agony, but your eyes are heavy with the weight of your own fear, and you drift off. You wake to the sound of marching boots and the flickering of torches. The betrayal is a kiss, a perversion of intimacy that makes you want to vomit.
You draw your sword. You want a physical fight. You want a battle you can understand. He stops you. He heals the ear of the man you tried to kill. He surrenders. You watch from the shadows as they lead him away. You follow at a distance, the follower now a stalker in the dark. You stand by a charcoal fire in a courtyard, your heart a cold stone. When they ask if you know him, the fear is a physical pressure in your lungs. You deny him, once, twice, 3 times. The rooster crows, and the sound is a jagged blade cutting through your soul. You see him across the courtyard. He turns, he looks at you. It isn't a look of, "I told you so." It is a look of such profound, agonizing love that it breaks you. You run into the night, sobbing, the salt of your tears tasting like the sea left behind. The 3 days of silence are a living hell. You have failed every test. You have broken every vow. You have returned to the shoreline, but the nets don't fit your hands anymore. You are a ghost inhabiting an old life. You go out on the boat, fishing through the night, catching nothing. The emptiness of the net is a perfect metaphor for your heart. At dawn, a figure stands on the beach. "Children, have you any food?" he calls. You don't recognize the voice at first. He tells you to cast the net on the right side. You do it, out of a weary, muscle memory obedience. The net suddenly jolts. It is heavy, it is tearing. It is 153 large fish.
Your heart stops. You don't wait for the boat to reach the shore. You plunge into the cold water, swimming with a frantic, desperate stroke. You reach the beach, gasping, dripping, and find him sitting by a charcoal fire. The smell of the smoke triggers the memory of your denial. You stand before him, stripped of your pride, your titles, and your strength. He doesn't ask for an apology. He doesn't demand an explanation. He asks one question 3 times. "Do you love me?" Each time you answer, you feel a piece of your shattered spirit being knit back together. "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." "Feed my sheep," he says. The commission is heavier than the first calling. The "follow me" was an invitation to watch. The "feed my sheep" is an invitation to die. He tells you that when you are old, someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. He is telling you clearly, this path ends in a cross of your own. As you stand on that beach, the sun rising over the hills of Galilee, you realize that your life is no longer yours. You are a vessel, a conduit for a story that began before the stars were lit and will continue long after the Roman Empire is dust. The trials will get harder. The opposition will become more violent. The internal struggle between your flesh and his spirit will be a daily crucifixion. But as you look at him, the scars in his hands a permanent map of his devotion, the fear doesn't vanish, it just becomes irrelevant. You take a step toward the town, toward the world, toward the inevitable end. You are no longer a fisherman, you are a witness. The journey isn't over, it has only just moved from the shore to the deep. You walk forward, and for the first time in your life, you aren't looking at the path, you are looking at the man.